Hi guys, I'm Dan at vintagevelo.org and today we are restoring this antique bike. Now we met this antique bike a few weeks ago when we did a short test ride video, which is fair to say ended up in near total disaster when the rear hub collapsed and it almost threw me in a ditch. The hell? Hopefully we can improve upon that performance, especially because I bought this bike with riding the superheroic category at l'Heroica in mind. And that is an awful lot of kilometres over a lot of gravel roads. And at the moment, this could not even do 1 kilometre over gravel roads. What we have is a very early EH Russ. I believe there are no decals, but all the features point towards it. It's an EH Russ English 3-speed. 3-speed hub on the back. It's a Sturmey Archer. These were done since like 1903 in the UK, so not a rarity to see that. But the hub on here is not the original. The original K hub that came with the bike, which was seized at the moment, is off being restored and rebuilt by a specialist who's putting it onto fresh old rims and with new spokes. Hopefully they'll arrive soon and they'll complete the package, but in the meantime we're going to get on with what we can. Reason why I think this is a Russ, it has two, apart from all the detailing and being Chatterley fittings, it has these two very distinctive oiler ports on the headset here. Now, they're not for a grease gun as we would imagine it, they're for a much smaller little palm oiler. And the idea of that is once a year you would push in through this little palm oiler some like thick oil, and that would reactivate the grease on the hubs and the bottom bracket, and it would make it all work better. Now obviously that kind of technology, it poured out all over your hand, so we're not going to be reusing that. We're going to strip this down and hopefully clean up everything, see what needs reworking and putting it back together. Plan is we are going to be fitting a front brake, as this only has the one rear brake and it's really not very good. Also of note, now you know me, I'm not necessarily a stickler for the setups, but there is one area which you know, you really shouldn't be messing around with. Obviously this one only has one brake, and if I get you in close here on the front brake here, you'll see where the previous owner has literally just wedged in the brake cable. One good sharp tug of that and that's just going to fly straight out. Really guys, there's not many areas where I would insist on things, but you know, that cable is really yeah, it's just plain dangerous. But then again, it goes with the theme of the whole bike, which is really pretty dangerous. Frame details, I really don't know much about it because it was repainted in World War II, probably for home guard riding. It was painted in a green, deep bronze green, as we painted a lot of stuff back then. Then post-war, that paint has been stripped off back to the original black, but that's taken the original probably water slide decals, wherever they were, off with it at the time. So I only had the frame details to tell me that it's a Russ. I think it's an early Reynolds 531. Again, they were making that since the early 20s, but I can't be certain. But that's what it would seem to be by looking at. There's just a few little details left on a sticker here that would suggest that's what it is. Lovely Brooks saddle. We're going to start feeding that in a moment. And the plan is, yes, pull everything apart, clean it all up, fix what we can, get a front brake on there, change this horrendous 54 tooth front cog here. We're going to change that crankset for a much nicer knee friendly 44 and then take it all from there. Oh, now just check out those bars. They are a work of art. Really, really slender in diameter. Some lovely little work there. Just extra part here's been brazed on by the look of it at the centre there. I can see a maker seems to be A and P Limited stamped on there, but I think these are going to clean up beautifully. They were once chrome, which is now obviously yeah, kind of coming off. We'll give those a buzz over the wheel shortly, but they are quite something. Not as heavy as I'd have thought, despite the fact they are made of weight-saving steel, same as the forged steel stem just here. But you know, hey, shouldn't be breaking on me, which is no bad thing after that last video we did on death stems. I think that one is going to be absolutely fine. But let's carry on getting this apart. One thing I do love about this old school antique bike tech is all the nuts and bolts are massive. There's no hint of weight saving really in anything on here. Everything is chunky and really well machined and manufactured. Yeah, bit of a joy. Well, that's all coming apart. I'm not going to strip this headset down just yet because there's going to be loads of loose bearings in there, so I'll do that on the floor. What I'm going to do now is go ahead and get this bottom bracket and crank set off, which means our good old friends cotter pins, which probably will be a different video in itself. Bottom bracket doesn't feel too bad. There's no slop or play in there, so overall it feels like it should rebuild okay. It's going to come down to whether it comes off. Now that was a result, got the cotter pin out. My technique for doing that, first off, soak it all for a few days in penetrating fluid, change the nut on the end for something newish that is a sacrificial thing, so you can wallop it with a hammer. Make sure that you haven't got any of the thread proud, and then give it a good wallop, one off, and it should push it out. This one came out straight away, which is excellent, and I've still got the original nut without any damage. So that is all good. There are many ways of getting these out. I'm sure a quick look on YouTube will find better than that. This one doesn't look too bad. There is some wear on there, but we might just take that little bit off there on that step that's created, but we'll see how it goes. Let's see what happens on the other side. So now the cranks are off there, we can really see what's going on with this bottom bracket. Now, it kind of felt all right when it was on there, but just check this out. That is really gnarly and horrible. Hopefully, with a good thorough clean, some new bearings, a re-grease, this is going to be okay. Time will tell. So there's our bottom bracket out. Looks pretty familiar to most bottom brackets. Bayliss and Wiley are the manufacturer. A little bit of wear on the non-drive side of the spindle. I'm hoping that the important part there on the race will polish out. Bearings are shot, they're going to need replacing, and the main problem was the grease was really old. But we'll wait and see how this feels once it's all reassembled with fresh bearings and fresh grease and nice and clean. But we'll see how that goes. Well, that is really quite fascinating. It's the first time I've taken apart one of these really old antique headsets. Obviously bearings everywhere, but I picked those all up. And unlike a normal quill stem where the expansion is on the inside, with these it's been split and it contracts onto the stem itself from the fork with the neat kind of overly engineered clamp just here. Clearly works very well. Not as heavy as I'd have thought, and the frame itself, now it's stripped, is really quite light as well. So I don't know what the overall weight's going to be. I think before it was about 12.5 kilo, but we'll see how this all goes together. In the meantime, I'm going to get on with trying to get some brakes on here and start cleaning up some parts. Now I've gone ahead, cleaned up the original spindle, fitted new bearings and fresh grease, and now that bottom bracket is smooth and lovely and ready to go, ready for many, many more years of cycling enjoyment. Going to put the new cranks on here. Now the new cranks, I must note, are really so much lighter, about half the weight of those 54 tooth horrendous big things that were on here. This one is a much nicer knee friendly 44, should be really good for those Heroica heels, and a much better, much more delicately machined piece of heavy steel. Still heavy, don't get me wrong, but a lot less heavy than the boat anchors that were on here. Well, that's really good. The headset, despite having about 50 tiny ball bearings loose on each race, has gone together beautifully. Really happy with that. Bottom bracket, that went in there okay. Having an issue at the moment with the cotter pins. The cotter pins from the original crankset don't fit the cotter holes for the new crankset. I've kind of knocked them in there. They're just not quite fitting correctly, so I've got a bit of wobbly play in the pedals here, which is nowhere near acceptable. So I'm gonna have to source some other cotter pins, and I mean we're talking fractions of a millimetre issues here, but I've got to deal with those right. But in the meantime, let's carry on, get a few more bits on. There's some brakes fitted up now as well. Now guys, if your brake pads look something like that, time to swap them out. Cool stops. I've got some cool stop universal pads on here. They do a really great job as long as you do the towing in correctly, which, you know, sometimes I overlook. These should do a good job of making probably pretty poor brakes do a half reasonable job. Now, some of you guys who are very observant may now notice the wheels have changed. The good guys down at In Gear, mainly James, the manager down there, despite it being a pro race shop, turns out he did a City and Guilds in Sturmey Archer rebuilds. And although this is a very early K, so he wasn't really familiar with it, he has done a rebuild on the original one, not the one that tried to throw me off, and build up some new old rims with fresh spokes as well, and nipples, and some new old tyres that should do the job quite nicely on the gravel roads. So it is now on there, chains on there, and the changer seems to work. With a bit of luck, we're going to get out there and give it a quick shakedown test ride shortly, but we've got a few more parts we've got to get on here yet. Namely going to work on the bars, get some bar tape on there, which I'm going to double layer because these handlebars are so thin. Also bottle cages and a few other peripherals, so stick with it just for a moment. Now that looks really cool. We've got the twin cages on here up front. These bottles are new alley ones, but I've aged them up just a little bit because I didn't want anything to look really glaringly new on here. Bar tape I've double wrapped because if you remember, those bars are really skinny. So double wrapping just gives me a bit more cushioning on that on the gravel roads this is planned for. We're just about ready, I think, to take this out for a test ride. So we're just going to do a few kilometre shakedown ride on here. Make sure nothing falls off. Before I do it, I'm just going to double check that everything's on nice and tight, and then we shall see how we go. Yeah, it's fair to say that this weather is not the best for this time of year, taking a bike out for a shakedown run, but we'll do it nonetheless. You'll have to excuse the fact I've got a helmet on. Let's not forget this thing tried to throw me off last time I rode it, so I don't want to take any chances just yet. Now, first impressions, they're really quite good. The frame now feels really good. I'm kind of starting just to get used to this strange geometry. It's very long. It's very stable, really wants to go in a straight line. I kind of like it, and I really like these handlebars. But obviously I'm going to have to spend most of the time on the drops because they are so swoopy. And just for a change, no one can moan at me about the positioning of the brake levers, because on these really old school antique bikes you only really brake from the drop, so you have to position the brake levers so as you can use them only off the drops. You wouldn't be riding on the hoods like we do in a modern configuration. Also, tyres now a lot better. Some new old stock rally things, but more importantly, the rims are hookless, and that means although it's a clincher, there's no little hook to hold the bead in, so you can only go up to a maximum of 50 psi on these because you don't want to blow it off the rim when you hit a bump or lump. But it does feel pretty comfortable. Overall, quite good. I think it's time for some gear changes.
Well, I'm going to put that down as a fairly successful shakedown run. The antique English 3-speed did not try and throw me off this time, which is excellent. The gear changes kind of work, minor adjustments will get that back up, and front and rear brakes give me a lot more confidence in it, and having a freewheel on the back rather than fixed also gives me a lot more confidence. I've got a plan in mind for a big test ride, early kind of, well, late spring, early May, something around there. But I'll give you more details on that when we give it a go. In the meantime, do like and subscribe for anything that's cool to do with vintage bikes. Thanks a lot.